The clock on the wall of the Boston Central Police Station ticked past 11:47 p.m. as Marcus Johnson, an 18-year-old in a worn gray janitorial uniform, pushed his cleaning cart to the quiet administrative wing. The air smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound in the empty halls. In the Detective Bureau's conference room, a team of seasoned investigators was unraveling over a case that had haunted them for 3 months. The murder of Clara Henshaw, a prominent local businesswoman. Detective Elizabeth Harper, a guest consultant from the state police, sat with her head in her hands, staring at a whiteboard covered in timelines, suspect profiles, and crime scene photos. Her team, Detectives Michael Torres, Laura Kim, and Samuel Wright, looked equally defeated, surrounded by case files and cold coffee cups. The Henshaw case was a labyrinth of dead ends. No witnesses, no clear motive, and evidence that led nowhere. Solving it would restore the department's reputation, but failure could cost them public trust and funding. "This case is a black hole," Detective Kim muttered, tossing a file onto the table. "We got nothing new." Detective Torres rubbed his eyes. "The chief's breathing down our necks. If we don't show progress by tomorrow's briefing, we're screwed." At 35, Harper was a rising star in criminal investigations, known for cracking complex cases. But this murder stumped her. "Let's call it," she said, voice heavy. "We'll try again tomorrow." As the detectives packed up and left, none noticed Marcus, the young janitor mopping the hallway. He overheard their frustration through the thin walls, their words sinking into his sharp mind. Marcus, fresh out of high school, had been cleaning the station for 6 months to support his mother. But he carried a secret, a mind that saw patterns in chaos, honed by years of solving puzzles and riddles in his spare time. The 18-year-old African-American male grew up in Dorchester, where boarded-up storefronts, graffiti-covered walls, and cracked sidewalks told stories of hardship. From childhood, he was an outlier, his mind a kaleidoscope of patterns. While peers traded comic books or shot hoops in cracked asphalt courts, he sat on his stoop, calculating rain probabilities from the shifting shapes of clouds or predicting exact change in bodega transactions before the cashier rang them up. At 10, he solved a Rubik's Cube in under a minute, twisting it with deft fingers while neighborhood kids watched, awestruck. His mind thrived on puzzles, crosswords, logic grids, even the rhythm of passing cars, which he'd count and categorize by color and model. In 8th grade, a 55-year-old American Caucasian woman with shoulder length, graying auburn hair in loose waves tied with colorful scrunchie, hazel eyes with laugh lines, a small upturned nose, heart-shaped face, beige skin, wearing a floral patterned blouse, beige slacks, and black flats, noticed his talent. She pulled his mother aside after class, her voice warm but urgent. He thinks like a detective, seeing connections others miss. He needs a mentor, maybe a gifted program. But his mother, a cashier working 16-hour shifts at a corner store, her hands callous and eyes weary, could only nod, whispering, "Maybe someday, when things get better." With no money for tutors or programs, the 18-year-old African-American male turned to the Dorchester Public Library, a squat brick building with flickering lights and worn shelves. It became his sanctuary, where he pored over dog-eared books on logic, cryptography, and criminal profiling, scribbling notes on borrowed paper. He taught himself to spot inconsistencies in witness statements and patterns in crime data, his fingers tracing diagrams of forensic techniques. By 16, he was analyzing true crime podcasts through cheap earbuds, mentally reconstructing cases while classmates wrestled with algebra homework. His high school counselor, a kind but overworked woman, urged him to apply for scholarships, but application fees were a luxury, and his mother's mounting hospital bills for a chronic asthma loomed like a storm cloud. He kept his talent hidden, a private flame nurtured in late-night study sessions under a flickering desk lamp. After graduating, the 18-year-old African-American male took the janitorial job at the police station, hoping to save for community college. The work was grueling, scrubbing sticky floors, emptying overflowing trash cans, cleaning bathrooms that reeked of neglect. But it placed him in the detective bureau, a world of case files, heated debates, and whiteboards scrawled with clues. He absorbed everything. Snippets of conversations about alibis, forensic reports left on desks, the cadence of detectives' frustration. That night, as he entered the conference room to clean, the case of the 42-year-old American Caucasian woman loomed on the whiteboard. A timeline of her last hours, a list of suspects, and photos of her bloodied office with scattered papers, a shattered coffee mug, and a faint smear of blood on a doorframe. He'd overheard the detectives' theories for weeks, their focus on obvious suspects, her ex-husband, a rival missing subtle clues. To him, the case was a puzzle begging for a fresh perspective, its pieces scattered but not invisible. The 18-year-old African-American male's gaze locked on a security camera photo timestamped 2:13 a.m., showing the 42-year-old American Caucasian woman's office door slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the dark hallway. The detectives assumed the murder occurred around 11 p.m., based on blood coagulation estimates from coroner's report, but he recalled a true crime podcast episode about forensic science, listened on a crackling bus ride home. Blood drying could be delayed in cold, climate-controlled environments, skewing timelines. Flipping through a case file left carelessly on the conference table, its pages dog-eared and stained with coffee rings, he found a maintenance log noting the office's air conditioning was set to 62 degrees Fahrenheit that night, an unusual choice for April's mild weather. The low temperature could have slowed the blood's drying process, pushing the time of death later than assumed. His mind raced, connecting dots. The detective's timeline was wrong, and their assumptions about suspects were built on a shaky foundation. His attention shifted to the suspect list pinned to the whiteboard, a jumble of names and grainy photos. One stood out. A 28-year-old African-American man with short, unkempt curly brown hair under a worn baseball cap, dark brown eyes, a wide nose with a slight bump, round face with a thin mustache, medium brown skin, wearing a dark green janitor uniform with his name embroidered in yellow, faded jeans and scuffed work boots. His alibi was flimsy, home alone, asleep. The 18-year-old African-American male cross-referenced the man's work schedule, obtained from a crumpled timesheet in the file, and noticed he clocked out at 1:45 a.m., just before the security camera malfunctioned for 20 minutes. A handwritten note mentioned his prior misdemeanor for stealing office supplies, dismissed by detectives as irrelevant. To the 18-year-old, it formed a pattern. An underpaid janitor with unrestricted access to the crime scene, a history of opportunistic crime, an unverified alibi during a critical window. He recalled overhearing that the victim's company had recently laid off staff, including the suspect's cousin, a detail buried in a witness statement. Could resentment have sparked something darker? He grabbed a black marker, his hand trembling with a mix of excitement and fear, and sketched a revised timeline in the whiteboard's corner. He noted the air conditioning's effect on blood evidence, the 28-year-old schedule gap, and the camera malfunction, linking them with arrows and precise annotations. He theorized that the 28-year-old, overlooked as a low-level worker, had opportunity and possibly a motive tied to the layoffs. In 7 minutes, he wove a narrative that tied loose ends into a coherent case. His heart pounded as he stepped back, the marker still in his grip. This could crack the case, but would anyone believe a teenage janitor with no credentials? Doubt crept in, whispering that he'd be accused of overstepping or worse, ridiculed. He considered erasing his work, smudging away with his sleeve, but thought of the 42-year-old American Caucasian woman's grieving family, pictured in a newspaper clipping, and the detectives' weary faces. Leaving the marker on the table, its cap loose, he finished cleaning, the squeak of his cart echoing in the silent station as he slipped into the night. At 6:05 a.m., the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman trudged into the conference room, her coffee cold in a chipped mug, her mind clouded with dread. The chief's briefing loomed in 3 hours, and her team had no leads. She pushed open the door, its hinges creaking and froze. In the whiteboard's lower corner, in neat black marker, was a revised timeline linking forensic discrepancies, the 28-year-old African-American man's schedule, and the camera gap. Her pulse quickened as she traced the logic, each step slotting into place like a lock clicking open. The air conditioning detail, the suspect's alibi, the precise annotations. It was a breakthrough she hadn't dared hope for. She fumbled for her phone, snapping photos, her fingers trembling with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, the dim light casting shadows across the board. She called a 42-year-old American Hispanic man, her voice urgent. "Get to the bureau now. Bring the others. This is big." Within 10 minutes, the team huddled around the board, their exhaustion replaced by astonishment. The 38-year-old American Korean woman cross-checked the maintenance log on her laptop, her fingers flying over the keys. "He's right about the AC slowing blood drying. We misread the timeline completely." The 50-year-old American Caucasian man ran the 28-year-old's alibi through a database, his glasses slipping down his nose as he confirmed its lack of corroboration. They tested the theory against case files, pulling out photos and reports, their voices rising with excitement. Every piece held up, from a forensic adjustment to the suspect's opportunity, forming a case that felt unshakable. Who did this? The 50-year-old American Caucasian man asked, his voice sharp, scanning the room as if the answer lingered in the dusty air. The 35-year-old American Caucasian woman was already on the phone with station security. Her tone clipped. "I need footage from the conference room, midnight to 6 a.m. ASAP." A guard promised a laptop within minutes. As they waited, the detectives speculated wildly, their voices overlapping. Another precinct's detective? A prank by a rival? The 42-year-old American Hispanic man wondered, pacing. The footage arrived, and they watched in silence as the 18-year-old African-American male entered at 12:30 a.m., his cart rattling, cleaning methodically before pausing at the whiteboard. For 7 minutes, he wrote with calm precision, then resumed cleaning and left. "The janitor?" The 38-year-old American Korean woman said, her voice a mix of disbelief and awe, her scarf slipping as she leaned forward. "He's a genius." The 35-year-old American Caucasian woman corrected, her mind racing with possibilities. "Been here 6 months, cleaning floors, and he's outsmarted us all. We need to find him before the briefing." She grabbed her coat, determination hardening her features, ready to track down the young man who had turned their dead-end case into a beacon of hope. The 18-year-old African-American male lived in a cramped Dorchester apartment, its peeling walls lined with second-hand puzzle books, true crime magazines, and pages of handwritten logic problems taped haphazardly. A single bulb cast flickering shadows over a cluttered desk where he'd spent countless nights reconstructing cold cases from podcasts, his mind weaving through clues like a needle through fabric. At 8:15 a.m., a sharp knock jolted him awake from a restless sleep on a lumpy mattress. Through the peephole, he saw the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman, her face a mix of urgency and curiosity, her blazer askew from a sleepless night, a faint coffee stain on her cuff. His stomach churned with a mix of pride and fear. Had his whiteboard notes been discovered? And would they bring trouble or recognition? American Caucasian woman, state police consultant. "We need to talk about the case," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. The 18-year-old African-American male opened the door cautiously, his bare feet cold on the worn linoleum. "I didn't mean to interfere," he said, his voice low, eyes flickering to the floor. She stepped inside, her gaze sweeping over his makeshift library, books on cryptography stacked beside a cracked laptop, a notebook filled with timelines of unsolved cases. "You may have solved a murder," she said, her tone softening. "How did you figure out?" He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "Books, podcasts, and listening to your team while I clean. I see patterns, alibis that don't hold, details you missed. I couldn't afford college, so I taught myself late nights after shifts, trying to make sense of the world." The 35-year-old American Caucasian woman sat on a sagging couch, its springs creaking, her eyes wide with realization. Your theory could save this case, maybe even lives. The chief needs to hear it directly from you. You could work with us, train as a civilian analyst. You've got a gift, one I've never seen in 20 years. Fear flashed in his eyes, his fingers tightening around a worn pencil. I'm just a kid who cleans floors. People will think I stole the idea or made it up. She leaned forward, her voice steady. We'll prove them wrong. Come to the briefing at 9 a.m. Show them who you are. He glanced at his books, his sanctuary, then at her determined face. Will you make sure they don't laugh me out? I promise, she said, her eyes unwavering. He nodded, a flicker of hope breaking through his doubt. The station's briefing room buzzed with tension, fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the scuffed walls. The 18-year-old African-American male entered with the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, his borrowed navy blazer hanging loosely on his slim frame. A 58-year-old American African-American man with a bald head sat at the head of the table, his scowl deepening as he raised an eyebrow. This is the guy who solved the case? He asked, his voice gravelly, skepticism etched into every word. The room, filled with officers and a few reporters, fell silent, all eyes on a young man who looked more like a high schooler than a detective. Yes, the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman said, standing firm beside him. He's ready to explain. The 58-year-old American African-American man slid a case file across the table, his gold watch glinting. Walk us through it, kid. The 18-year-old African-American male approached the whiteboard, his hand steady despite the weight of scrutiny. He outlined his theory, the air conditioning's effect on blood drying, pushing the murder past midnight, the 28-year-old African-American man's weak alibi during the camera gap, the layoff of his cousin as a potential motive. He spoke clearly, pointing to timelines and logs, his logic airtight. The officers leaned forward, some jotting notes, others exchanging glances of surprise. Impressive. The 58-year-old African-American man said, his scowl softening slightly. Bring the 28-year-old in for questioning. If this checks out, we're offering you analyst training, starting next month, with a scholarship for coursework. The 18-year-old African-American male exhaled, his shoulders relaxing, overwhelmed by the opportunity. Thank you, sir. I don't want to help, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The 35-year-old American Caucasian woman clapped his shoulder, a proud smile breaking through her fatigue. You nailed it. But brace yourself. The press is coming, she warned, her eyes glinting with both caution and encouragement as they left the room. The station's auditorium was packed, reporters jostling with cameras, officers lining the walls, their badges glinting under bright lights. The 18-year-old African-American male stood at the podium, palms sweaty in his borrowed navy blazer, white button-up shirt, dark jeans, and scuffed black sneakers, his heart pounding like a drum. He took a deep breath, steadying his voice. I saw a pattern in the case, details about the timeline and the suspect's alibi that didn't add up. I've studied logic and profiling on my own, from books and podcasts, listening to detectives while I cleaned the station's floors. His words echoed through the room, met with a mix of curiosity and skepticism from the crowd, some scribbling furiously, others whispering doubts about his age and background. A reporter from a local paper cut in, her voice sharp. How does a teenage janitor crack a murder case? The 18-year-old African-American male met her gaze, unflinching. Patterns don't care about your age or job. It's about seeing what's hidden. A 47-year-old American Caucasian woman withstood, her tone challenging. Can you prove your skills beyond one case? She asked, clutching a leather notebook, her presence commanding the room's attention as a state police captain known for her rigorous standards. He gestured to the whiteboard behind him. Give me a scenario. The 47-year-old American Caucasian woman described a cold case, a convenience store robbery with conflicting witness statements and grainy footage. The 18-year-old African-American male analyzed on the board, his marker moving swiftly, pinpointing inconsistencies in the witnesses' timelines and suggesting a second accomplice based on a discrepancy in the suspect's description. In 10 minutes, he presented a lead that made the room hush. The 47-year-old American Caucasian woman reviewed his work, her stern expression softening. "That's solid. I'd follow this up," she said, nodding. The crowd erupted in applause. He seized the moment. "I was invisible, cleaning the station. But I'm not alone. Kids in Dorchester, in neighborhoods like mine, have potential. We just need a chance to be seen." 6 months later, the 18-year-old African-American male sat in a civilian analyst training session at the station, his notebook brimming with insights that drew nods from his instructors. The room, lined with corkboards of case updates, buzzed with the energy of new recruits. He'd excelled, assisting on 2 additional cases, a burglary ring takedown and a fraud investigation, his knack for spotting patterns earning him quiet respect. His theory on the 42-year-old American Caucasian woman's case had led to the 28-year-old American African-American man's arrest. Under interrogation, the suspect confessed, admitting he'd acted out of anger over his cousin's layoff, a theft gone wrong when confronted by the victim. The 18-year-old African-American male's breakthrough had closed a case that had haunted Boston, and his name was whispered in the station's halls. At a station cafe, he met the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman, now in a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit and light blue shirt, her ponytail neater but her eyes still sharp. "You're a natural," she said, sipping coffee, her voice warm with pride. "It's unreal," he admitted, stirring his coffee, the steam curling in the air. "I was mopping floors, now analyzing crime scenes. Sometimes I think I'll wake up back in Dorchester, pushing that cart." "Your story's changing things," the 35-year-old American Caucasian woman said. "We're getting applications from teens who heard about you, kids from Roxbury, Mattapan, wanting to be analysts, detectives, profilers." He nodded, his jaw set with purpose. "I'm starting a mentorship program for Dorchester kids. Logic, puzzles, profiling. They shouldn't be just for the privileged. I want them to know they can do this too." She raised her coffee cup, a smile breaking through. To seeing the unseen, one case at a time. A year later, the 18-year-old African-American male stood at a podium in the Dorchester Community Center, its walls adorned with youth art and motivational posters. He spoke to a crowd of teens, his voice confident, encouraging them to pursue analytical careers in law enforcement or STEM. The Marcus Johnson Fund, created with his reward money from a case, supported 15 local students with tutoring, laptops, and STEM workshops, giving them tools he'd lacked. At the station, he was a rising star, his desk piled with case files, his inbox filled with thank-you emails from families he'd helped. No longer the invisible janitor, he was proof that brilliance could emerge from anywhere, his mind already turning to the next mystery Boston streets would offer, ready to unravel it with the same quiet precision.